Yeah, let's go. We can start now. Yeah.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Or maybe good afternoon to some of you. Congratulations for completing the first day of the webinar with 3 intensive presentations. And I would like to welcome you all on the second day and also last day of the course. As a reminder and a short summary, what you have heard and learned yesterday from Professor Morshik from University of Rostock introduced us with waste audits and characterization step by step, of course, including some practical example. Later, Dr. Mansour from the UK had presented some challenges and steps for traditional solid waste management and how to adapt the system based on the goal-targeted methodologies, and presented some specific examples about recycling, such as plastic recycling, and also asked you some questions for compost or metal recycling. What kind of data do we need? And the questions would be part of your assignment to issue certificate. So I hope you have noted, and today you will get more detail in the next presentation. Yesterday we concluded the webinar with a presentation from our colleague from beautiful Nairobi in Kenya about the Sustainable Development Goal in the UN Habitat. So yesterday you have had a lot of questions regarding the contents, and probably some of the questions left unanswered. That's why we have today 3 more presentations to provide you with some answers and also give you a deeper insight into the difficulties, because yesterday was more on the administrative side and sampling up to finding the waste composition. After the waste composition, when we go on the city level, we will have more demands to understand, for example, how the informal sector activities in the country or in the city works. And for this, we invited a speaker who has been working for a long time. But before I introduce our speaker, I would like to mention that Shiza Aslam, my colleague from ISWA, get almost all the credits for the course. Credit for this course she initiated and also has been working on this course to make it happen, of course, with the colleagues from online discussion meeting of ISWA. So Shiza, before I introduce our speaker and myself, I give you 90 seconds to introduce the young professional group to this who did not participate yesterday. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Rizka, for giving me the opportunity to introduce and giving me the credit, though it was very much of a teamwork, but thank you again. Hello, everyone. I am Shaza Aslam. I'm the lead of the online discussion group at ISWA YPT, but also working as a research fellow at the Circular Plastics Institute in Pakistan. So very pleased to have you all here at Young Professional ISWA Group. We are young professionals passionate about waste management or circular economy in general. And we are a bunch of a group of volunteers. So all this effort put in here you see today is all volunteer activities. So I would really suggest and recommend you guys joining us and maybe helping us with our online discussion group activities. What we do is usually arranging webinars, deep dive sessions, master classes, and training courses like this one as well. With that, I think I'll hand over back to Rizkar. And just a request when you're to all the participants, it would be great if you all can mute yourself. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Shiza, for the introduction. Maybe some of you asked now who's Rizgar talking to us without video. First, I apologize for not having video. Rizgar is a PhD student originally from Autonomous Region of Kurdistan in the north of Iraq and a PhD student in Germany. But I am based and working for the City Council of Stuttgart in the south of Germany. Now, I will go to the first presentation and ask Mr. Andy Whiteman to share his slides. While he's sharing his screen, I am introducing him just shortly because I cannot introduce what he has done in the last 30 days only within 1 or 2 minutes. So, Mr. Andy Whiteman is the director of Resource and Waste Advisory Group and also the founder of Waste Aware. His his main focus is waste sector development and working in more than 40 countries in the last 3 decades. So, Mr. Whiteman, I will give you the floor and we are all listening to just a little part of your long experience.
Hi, everybody. Greetings from Bulgaria. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I'm sure we'll have an interesting experience here. So basically, I'm going to run through, fly over my experiences in the most recent years. I've been working for quite some time, as got mentioned, in this sector, and it's been a fascinating area of work to be able to enjoy over this time. Just hold on, excuse me, while I navigate my. There we go. All right. You can see the screen, okay? Yeah, I'm presuming. Just give me a shout if there's anything else. So a little bit about myself. I started professional work in 1990, which was quite a long time ago. That's actually 33 years ago now. I started in Hong Kong, actually. I was traveling after university. I did one of the first university degrees in environmental science in the UK. Actually, I think it was the second year that course ever existed. And I graduated in 1989, and by 1990 I'd been traveling a bit around Asia and popped up in Hong Kong and managed to luckily find myself a job with a wonderful company called ERM. And so I worked based in Hong Kong during a 4-year period, which was a very exciting time there. There was a lot of project work going on, but more and more as time went on, I was doing general environmental work and consultancy work, actually. But more and more, more projects I took on, the more I realized that the waste sector was interesting to me. And it was at that time very young, certainly in the international consultancy work and international development work. Pretty much really only started a few years prior to, in the late 1980s. Whilst, waste management as a profession, as a sort of an intellectual profession, pretty much started in the mid-70s. The international work really kicked off in the late 1980s. So I was one of the first people to get stuck into this sector, and then I went and did a master's degree in 1994 to 1995, actually in development studies. So by that time, I'd realised that I was very interested in international development and very interested in solid waste management, and luckily in 1995 I got a job in the London branch of the same company I was working for previously, working for a wonderful guy called Professor David Wilson, who is my mentor, and many of you would have heard of his name in wonderful publications he's written over the decades. And I stayed there for best part of 3 years, managing projects and traveling around the world. And then in 1997, I started an NGO called Waste Aware, which has been is still going on. And in 2008, with a bunch of friends who also had small organizations, we formed what's called the Resources and Waste Advisory Group. And that was from 2008. And we're now at 2023. And And there's been some major breakthroughs, I think, recently in the last, but there was a lot of hard work getting municipal solid waste management and waste management in general on the radar of international organizations, even national governments. There's always been a sense of importance at the local level, but really the global level never really caught up until recently, or caught on, I could add. So, I mean, my sort of core really is I'm a bit of a traveller, really, well, a lot of a traveller, and I've just been going around the world doing this work, massive carbon footprint, what needs to be atoned for, and hopefully that's one of the reasons why I try to do a good job as I go around. But I mean, I looked at the participants list, and so there are many people from many places joining. So I've been to quite a few of the countries you're joining from. Some for many years, over a course of many years I've worked. Others I haven't been to yet. So looking forward to the opportunities on that list. You know, the fascination for me, really, you know, it started with, you know, project coordination, project management. I loved being able to pick up a project, implement or work on that project for a few months, and then switch to something else which is fresh, keeping my mind active, and doing different things and capturing loads of experience. But over a few years, I sort of like really got stuck into strategic planning for municipal solid waste management, focused mainly in low and middle income countries. And in 2001, I was co-authored a guideline document called the Strategic Planning Guide for municipal solid waste management in low and middle income countries. It's pretty much difficult to find nowadays, but it was a massive piece of work published by the World Bank, and I'm working at the moment to get that back into play, to bring that resource back in its updated form. Then I focused from planning. I drifted towards working in policy level, because I always wanted to maximize the impact of my work. But then from policy, I really, you know, thought, well, you know, policymakers really need, you know, more. We need to push them more. You know, we need to give them more reasons to push. And I got really into evidence, which is included data, and then, you know, sort of all the way through. And my next sort of like challenge for the remaining part of my career will be in really trying to implement as much as possible, as quickly as possible, and try to innovate in that space. On the evidence and data side, we've developed over the years and host in partnership with other organisations, both global organisations and organisations like ours, private organisations. So what we call the trilogy of tools. One is the Waste-Wise Cities tool, which we developed together with UN Habitat, which you've already heard about. Another is the waste-aware benchmark indicators, or called WABIs, which were actually developed, started being developed in about 2010. Were published in a mature-ish state in 2015, and have been also revised and updated since then. They're probably the most mature tool that's going in our sector. I certainly encourage you to look into there. And also one of the more recent ones, the waste flow diagram, which we prepared together with GIZ, University of Leeds, and others, Airwag from Switzerland. And that's basically a flow mapping tool which helps you to understand flows and captures and leakages from the system. So from municipal solid waste management systems. So those tools combined give you shine lights on different things. They are now online accessible at that link. I really encourage you to go and explore that portal. it's an excellent resource, and there's a lot to learn and a lot to capture from there, which I certainly don't have time to get into. One of the great things I've experienced was in the last few years was working together with the UN Habitat team and others to develop the WACT. Really, over the many years, I've been doing practical work in this topic in different places. There was never any really convincing standard approach to actually collecting data, primary data. We always used to sort of, like in the olden days, we used to sort of simply ask the cities, the municipal, officers or municipal waste officers, if they existed, what they thought, and then we went out to the disposal site and we looked around there and made assumptions from that. But really, as time moved on, we realized it's so totally inadequate just to look at one end of the system, just look at the back end of the system, or rely on information which you are given, because information comes from guesstimates, which come from information which come from guesstimates. And until you do fresh primary, what we call primary data collection surveys, then really, everything's shaky. You're not really basing anything. And the COVID pandemic really brought that into focus because things changed, and data, the waste management before is certainly different to waste management during, and will be different to waste management demand side of waste and resources management, now we call it, nowadays, and it's always evolving. And so what the WACT does essentially is it captures data points from different parts of the chain, including the back end of the system, including the front end at the household and at the non-household, at the commercial institutional point of generation. And then by essentially a series of investigations can help to triangulate. It's not perfect. There are really difficult things to get your head around when you do this work. In particular, understanding and capturing data from non-household waste generators, meaning like shops, other commercial buildings, hospitals, hotels, markets, etc. This is municipal solid waste being generated, but from non-household sources, and it's getting a statistically significant set of data from non-household sources is really quite challenging. Households also challenging by virtue of the fact, we've got all types of communities, all types of neighbors, infinite amount. One thing I'll say on household waste generation is that we're really suffering a lack of data in low-income and slum communities. Often the data that is collected is collected from waste that's already been collected. And we know that the largest proportion of the problem of the emissions to the environment of waste, including plastics, including burning, and the black carbon associated impacts and onward climate impacts, comes from waste which is not collected. So capturing data from the collection system only gives you information about those luxurious places that receive a waste collection service. So you really, in designing your survey, it's really important to spend a disproportionate amount of effort trying to understand the waste generation and management trends and situation in low income and slum communities. And the more we do that work, the more we drum up financing for that work, the better, because that is the source of the largest source of the problem, in my personal opinion. It's also the most under-recognized issue. But what the WACT does is it looks at classifies into the facilities, into recovery facilities and disposal facilities. That's an important distinction to make. We don't use the term treatment, we use the term recovery, and that captures a family of facilities all the way from through the chain from what are commonly termed junk shops, for example, or buyback centres, or collection points for recovered materials, all the way through to end-of-use processing facilities for those materials. So it's a very, very complicated multi-handling chain of market-driven multi-handling chain for materials, which is also really difficult to get good data from, because in the waste management sector, waste and resources management sector, people are scared of inquisitions from authorities, and they don't really want to declare often the quantities and the values that of the materials, because that leads to a level of information which they feel potentially threatened by. And that is a key point when it comes to understanding and working with the recycling value chain and try to capture data from the recycling value chain, is that you have to recognize that at the collector end, certainly in lower middle income countries, people have been effectively persecuted for many, many years, and are very, very suspicious of authority and its intentions. And at the same time, it's very often to work in a situation where lovely people we're working with in the sector, but see that the informal sector as a threat rather than an opportunity. So we have essentially a interplay and a dynamic in which is ingrained in many waste management systems of mistrust, and capturing good data from the recovery value chain is a challenge which needs significant amount of effort and patience, and at the end of the day, it needs some guesstimation, inevitably. One thing that is important to realize when you embark upon data collection, evidence gathering in our sector, is that you don't need to worry too much about accuracy, because the waste that's generated today will by definition be different to the waste that's generated tomorrow. Certainly it's good if you have the resources to do seasonal analyses. That brings further richness into your data set, but you should never say that, never allow yourself to think that data is correct, because by the time you collected it, it's already out of date. By the time you processed it, it's even more out of date. So we're looking at, and also waste management systems and recovery systems need to be designed with flexibility for that very point. So exact, precise amounts here and there, at the end of the day, matter less than a good enough understanding. Disposal facilities are also very challenging to collect data from, largely because it's very rare that there is a functional weighbridge, at least in lower middle income cities. Very, very rare there's a functional weighbridge. So you end up in a situation where, how are you going to go about understanding the composition you can do? You can do composition analysis, and quartering and technique, which I'm sure you've already studied, but it's the quantities that's difficult to get, and quantities are often more important to understand than composition. Actually, largely, you could say you can adopt rules of thumb. Not good to do that. You've got to do composition analysis, but quantities are really, really underrepresented in baseline data collection, and it can make a huge difference, because it's the quantities which provide the basis for the design of this. Not only the facilities, the recovery and disposal facilities, but the collection system as well. And let's place a moment to think that waste that gets to recovery and disposal facilities in many cities is the lucky waste. A lot of it's either not collected, or at least to recognized, or what we call designated recovery facilities and disposal facilities. A lot of waste just goes in the wrong direction. It goes for one reason or another, and they're complex interchains of incentives for different reasons for waste to not go in the direction it's supposed to go. So capturing data at the back end is really important. And what the WasteWise Cities tool does is essentially, in its core, it says, right, it's municipal solid waste that is generated, and the proportion of that generated municipal solid waste, which is collected, A, and B, managed in controlled facilities. So collected is a different story than managed in controlled facilities. This example here, which I've taken from, I think it's from somewhere in the Philippines, is a case where, the collected amount is actually equivalent to the managed and controlled facilities because they have good facilities. Now, that's a really good scenario, but others are, of course. So I just wanted to highlight and give you a flyover. I think we're going to return to, and I do encourage you to study the WACT closely. It's a really good tool. It's not perfect, but it's a good tool to start from and to adapt things from. Okay, so now if I may, I'm going to fly over onto the next little chapter in this presentation, which is why data. For what? What are we doing this for? So we collect data for research purposes. I'm not a data scientist. I'm a practitioner. But research is really important for us to have a repository of information and data that can help us to proxy, to do these guesstimates on a reasonable understanding. One of the key areas where more research is really needed that we've identified is, again, back to this point, the proportion of household versus non-household waste, municipal solid waste, generated in different situations. And if you work in the plastics pollution of the ocean sector, you do a lot of work in tourist economies, and you realize that actually the non-household waste can dominate, can be more than 50% of the total municipal solid waste. And there's really very difficult and there's not enough research on that in order to basically do the essential scaling of facilities. So a lot of work is needed in that. We do data collection, evidence gathering for planning, for solid waste management, for strategic planning, for operational optimization. It's critical to understanding, collection timings, numbers of trucks, numbers of trips. We use data evidence gathering for monitoring purposes, for benchmarking, and for reporting, including reporting in little by little to international, global level. And the meta question is really, data really allows us to understand where we are in relation to the triple planetary crisis topics of supporting climate mitigation, preventing pollution, and combined with that contributing to human development, because solid waste management is essentially it's more of a social science really than a science. There's a tremendous amount of activity, employment, social justice, social injustice in the waste and resources management sector, but also biodiversity and for collecting data, because if you think of big cities in, for example, Asia, large cities, they're sucking a lot of the nutrients into the cities people are consuming, and unless those nutrients go back to the rural area, we've got a consistent nutrient drain out of our soils, across the world. And I think that's another thing that's going to start popping up. It's going to pop up more and more. But we've got, thankfully now, an anchor to work to. And that is the Municipal Solid Waste SDG indicator, indicator 11.6.1, which the Wastewise Cities tool, the WACT, is designed to measure. It's the method for measuring where you stand on indicator 11.6.1, which, as I've mentioned already, is a proportion of municipal solid waste which is collected, managed, and controlled facilities out of the total municipal waste generated. Can't go in too much into the detail, but I have a recent paper together with some colleagues called the 9 development bands, which I'd encourage you to go and have a look at. It's a free download, so you can have a read. And you know what we've understood and hypothesized to a reasonable degree of, you know, it's a hypothesis, but we feel it holds fairly well. Is that, you know, if you think of waste management systems as this tree, you know, the roots of the tree is where systems are taking hold. The trunk of the tree is where, you know, you're really progressing towards, you know, being able to, and this DB5, Development Band 5, is what we define now as the target baseline. Now, that what we mean there is that target baseline as in relation to SDG indicator 6.1, 11.6.1, which essentially is saying, look, you know, 95, but you really need to be capturing in collection services and ensuring is managed in controlled facilities 95+%. You can't really talk about 100% because merely the data, the variation in the uncertainty in the data, but 95% plus. And once you've got that, you've really significantly mitigated the environmental, health, social consequences of unmanaged and uncollected waste. So, you know, a lot of time when the work we do around the world, we land in a place, we go and see a mayor or a minister, and they're often talking about essentially, you know, the desired point is to jump all these development bands and let's have really high tech this or high tech that, and with expensive back end systems, for example. You know, there are some places where, you know, a lot of money has been invested in high tech, for example, incinerators in low and middle income cities. Sometimes I'm not anti incineration. I am pro financial sustainability and technical sustainability. But you find that, you know, the whole thing's been designed based on data collected at the back end of the system, you know, guesstimated without understanding that, you know, actually only 25, 30, 45% of the generated municipal solid waste is actually collected. Therefore, these back-end facilities don't receive anything or don't receive enough. But not always the case, of course, but it's something to be very careful of. So the target baseline is, look, let's capture the waste, let's collect the waste regularly and reliably. Let's manage that waste in controlled facilities. And the big question, which I really hope you wonderful young people are going to get stuck into, is like, all right, that's all very good, but you know, but what about circular economy at the earlier stage of development? We don't want all this waste. We don't want to be managing tons and tons. We want to be utilizing the materials. We need to stop talking about so much about waste and start talking about locally generated materials that can be captured and utilized in without having to go into expensive systems. Because what you find is the higher you go up this development band tree, the costs per ton of the waste management escalate exponentially. So you know, really, there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done to try to avoid having to having to pay such an unreasonable amount of money per ton. In total, by minimizing the tonnage. So as I said, quantities are really, really important and underrepresented at the moment in composition is vital. It's really important to understand what you can do with different materials and how can you capture, of course, for that circularity discussion, but quantities are really vital. So, all right, and I'm just taking a little bit of a moment to flip on. I wanted just now to fly through three recent cases, and I don't have a huge amount of time to go into it, so I will endeavour to fly. I'm looking at the time. I've got about half an hour left, and so I'm going to look at project work, sort of like summarise flyover that we did in the Philippines in 2020 to 21, in Lebanon in 2021, and Uganda in 2022. I guess that some of you who are joining this event are from there, so send my fondest regards to you all. All of these places are lovely places to go. And let me start with the Philippines. Okay, so in 2020 to 21, now if we recollect, there was a rather important thing going on in the world, and that was the COVID pandemic. Now, we were asked by UN Habitat, who had got some financing from Japanese overseas financing, to go and test trial the new WACT. At that stage, the WACT was, had just been published, or was just about to be published, and about halfway through this project, it was published. And we were pretty excited. We'd got this draft, final field tested methodology we thought was pretty cool. And our job was to go and test it out in a live situation. Within a project which was called the Healthy Oceans and Clean Cities Initiative, the HOCI project, and just some highlights of what we experienced is that we landed into a situation. Well, I didn't physically land because I wasn't allowed to travel anywhere, and we had to do this whole project remotely, but with great people, and so involved who were also in lockdown in both in Manila and in 5 other cities that were involved in the study. So 6 cities in total. We were working together with the municipalities, together with the teams that municipalities had assembled, and very quickly we figured out that a couple of years ago, before, in the late teens of 2000, a national standard methodology for waste characterization had been adopted. And so we came in with WACT, which had at that time 12 categories of components of municipal solid waste that were the lines of inquiry. So you end up practically sorting into 12 categories, to a situation where there's actually above 30 different categories, which it's pretty full on to try to have a team trained up to even to identify accurately that many components of materials, let alone to do that remotely. But luckily, there was a really dedicated team of people, and really creative work done, which provided, like, one of the great things was a mat that you're sorting, where you've got to do sorting on the floor. When we're talking about this work, largely on the floor. And they got this large, huge mat, essentially, which was encircled by the categories. So the people that were actually doing the sorting could refer on the floor to different things. But it does get, significantly complicated, and now there are obviously non-plastic, oil-based materials which are coming into the system, bio-based packaging, which also may increase the complexity, and really is getting more complex rather than less. But what we had to do is essentially, and this national standard methodology, it wasn't an option, it was a mandatory thing. And the Philippines has done a tremendous amount of work over the last 5 to 10 years at getting their planning systems really up to scratch. So if you're a municipality, in order to get finances for your waste management system, you need to prepare a waste management plan. That plan needs to be approved, adopted, authorized, and that plan needs to have contents which are in line and with them based on this WACS, waste analysis and characterization study methodology. So the cities are under no illusion at all that doing this work is something which is a core activity to them if they want to get financing for waste management systems, and everybody wants to get financing for waste management systems, which, by the way, is another reason why we collect data. Okay, so survey implementation really involved teams of 20 people going on. Sorry, go ahead. Somebody speaking?
No, Andy, you can go ahead.
Okay, cool. All right, so now what's the outcome of this? One thing is that the generation rate of municipal solid waste in not all the cities, we found it was lower than the standard, off-the-shelf guesstimates, quite significantly lower. Mind you, we were implementing during COVID. So we found that what happened is that during COVID, there was a reduction in total quantities, and also a balance between household and non-household. And bear in mind, the cities did a lot of work on non-household. We found that regardless of that, okay, people were staying at home, the generation shifted towards household, but nevertheless, the household generation rate per person was lower than we thought that it would be. We also found that this case there is I think I've dropped the wrong one in. We also found that in some of the cities they had captured and controlled quite a significant proportion of that waste. So it was like zero to hero type of thing. One city would have like a very low managed and controlled facilities. Another city would have a very high, because they simply had received this investment that I talked about, which is vital to the back end facilities. We found that the recovery rate, i.e., the recycling rate, materials captured for recovery, was quite variable, from about 5% to around, in some cases, 30%. So really market dependent, local market dependent. And we also found that plastic leakage, and this is quite controversial, because I don't know whether you've read the academic papers on the topic of plastic pollution of the ocean, but the data on which the famous 8 million tons is based is largely from these guesstimated studies in 2010. Now we're in 2023, and I'm sorry, but things have changed. And in the case of Philippines, this is my personal point of view, that in that 10 years, quite a significant amount of reform has happened to the municipal solid waste management system. They've really been paying a lot of attention to it. By the way, similarly multiplied by 3 or 10 or 100, it goes for China. China's got the most fantastic urban waste management systems, in many cases, in many aspects, are further advanced than those in many of the other OECD countries. So including USA, in my opinion. So, you know, the figures which we rely on for policy measures, and those policy and financing measures are reliant on evidence, which has been really shaky up to now. So there's really is the global agenda for our sector depends on getting some better, let's call it good, let's definitely not call it accurate data. But what we found is that essentially the plastic leakages are much lower than was supposed in many cases. So that's not saying there's not a problem. That's not saying that, but when you look at the relative ranking of countries in terms of the contribution to ocean pollution of plastics, then you have to understand. I would encourage you to understand that, yeah, it's all based on guesstimates, really, until hopefully the next 10 years, the quality of data skyrockets. And that for that to happen, there needs to be a lot of time, money, investment, and well-trained people to go and do this work. So I seriously hope all my hopes and rest on you, young people, to really get stuck in. You know, right? Enough of that. Let's move on to Lebanon. Different situation. You know, you collect data for different projects for under different terms of reference for different reasons with different objectives. This one in Lebanon in 2021, lovely project financed by the World Bank ProBlue program and implemented together with the Ministry of Environment in Lebanon, looked at a marine litter baseline across the whole coastline of Lebanon. And if you look at the map, it's quite a long one. It's quite a significant coastline onto the Mediterranean Sea. And our job was to characterize the marine litter, but also to look inland and look at the sources. And we call this source to sea type analysis. And in order to do that, you really need to employ not only this trilogy of tools that I've already mentioned, but also tools which help you to understand, you know, the specific proportion of debris on beaches. And there are a couple we used in this frame. So if you think of the chain of emissions to the environment, and not just to water systems, but to environment, there are, you know, we've got tools that help us to understand the quantities and composition. We've got tools that help us to understand leakages. And we've got tools to help us to understand the results of those leakages, the eventual results. But we don't really have tools yet to understand the pathways. We don't really understand how materials behave when they're transported. And it's a huge area of where science and research needs to try and fill that gap. We can make assumptions. We have to make assumptions. Well, one of the things we really found, which is wasn't expected, but the data really showed it, is that actually a lot of the debris which we were finding on the beaches wasn't. We all in the waste and resources management sector, we all go, yeah, it's all about inadequate waste management systems, as I've been talking about, you know, until now. But in the case of this survey, really it was littering from people that go on the beaches. It was littering. It was human behavior that was causing this more than a systemic. Of course, there is a component of systemic emissions, you know, from collection and recovery and disposal systems and not uncollected waste. But Lebanon, during this time, you know, it was largely collecting the majority of waste. By the way, the last few years has been a collapse of the serious collapse of the economy, and the waste management system in Lebanon is really at risk of collapsing along with it. But and this baseline data for 2021 will be is a comprehensive study which will enable for that to be investigated in the next few years. And I really hope that for my Lebanese friends and that the situation turns around and everyone's safe. But essentially there is a gap in the methodology spectrum here. So I just wanted to highlight that, but say, okay, there's a gap. It's not perfect. We can't understand everything, but let's keep going. Let's get as good a data as we can at the front end, the leakages, the generation leakages, the managed and controlled facilities, and the back end about what the consequences are. Because people that make decisions, people that make financing decisions or operational financing, assign budgets, need to know what the implications of cutting budgets or not providing enough budgets are. And data evidence, as I'm presented at the beginning, is there partially for policy makers. That's how I got excited about it. So, I mean, the beach surveys were the methodologies that were utilized are worth looking in. The CSIRO Standing Stock Survey, which is an Australian organization that looks, essentially at a single point in time. And then the SST Accumulation Survey, so the Sustainable Seas Trust. And so that it looks at accumulation. So basically you go back the next day, how much is on, you clean it at the beginning, and you go back for multiple days afterwards, and you look at the rate at which materials of debris is repopulated on the beach. So you look at the temporal aspect of, and with this we were very lucky with our client, the World Bank, that they were able to fund spring and autumn surveys. It was just post COVID, so we had a field team from our team out there as well, working hard. As I mentioned already, that one of the interesting things was that behavior versus systemic leakages. We found really that human behavior was a problem. So that brings into play the huge amount of work that is needed on behavior change and communication. And as I mentioned, transport pathways being a remaining challenge to understand. So, I'm now flying after Lebanon, another place I really enjoyed being, to Uganda, which I really fell in love with Uganda. I hope there's some friends from Uganda on this call, but what a nice place, great people to work with. So in 2022, last year, from around spring last year until just basically put the report in, we worked together with 4 municipalities that were surrounding Kampala, in what's called the Greater Kampala Metropolitan Area, and funded by a fund called the City Climate Finance Gap Fund, which is the European Investment Bank, GIZ, also World Bank and others are involved in that funding. And we were looking, in this case, the objective of this work was a pre-feasibility study. It was like a investment, in a project preparation for investment, looking at, okay, we have a problem. Houston, we have a problem. Let's understand the extent of that problem, and let's rapidly put together an investment project, and looking at the pre-feasibility of that. And here we turn the attention for data, which is vital to understanding. We flip the idea of waste on its head and go, no, I'm not talking about. We're talking about feedstocks. We're talking about feedstocks for local cottage-style industry, different processes, different types of techniques of capturing, as I mentioned, at the local level. We weren't designing a highly centralized system. We were looking at local opportunities, which also ties in with economic development, as you'll know. And in order to do this, with a notice, by the way, the title of this project, I didn't put it on there. It was a climate finance focus one, not plastic pollution in the ocean. So this money was coming from climate financing. When you talk about climate financing, you have to look at the organics. The organics, certainly in lower and middle income countries, are the predominant proportion of the municipal solid waste stream. We have a different, we have a different focus. So yeah, we applied the trilogy of tools as we do, but we're really zoomed in on organic putrescible waste. Well, organic waste meaning putrescible. I did a chemistry degree. Organics can be anything with carbon in it, but it's generally used a term to refer to putrescible waste which will decompose, and also focusing on the non-household sector, because if you're going to have cottage industries, and collecting source separated organic waste is very difficult from households, certainly where there's certainly if you're an investor. You want larger quantities of organics that you can rely on as your feedstock, because it's a feedstock. It's like any industry wants a reliable supply of feedstock for their manufacturing. And when you start thinking about that, you start thinking about waste in a different way. So we learned a lot doing those surveys. And one of the things is that, you know, we were able to characterize tons per day per municipality. And these tons here are the tons generated of organics only from non-household sources in these municipalities. And there were, you know, multiple times larger organics generated in terms of quantities from household sector. But in order to have like it's something to hang on for an investment project, as I mentioned before, the focus was on non-household sources that could be more easily captured, and then take it from there, scale up by, you know, absolutely. And from there, we were able to design an investment program which was quite, which is all-encompassing, and I really hope that it gets traction and is financed. But literally, the work has just been completed. But so far so good. Lovely people we were working with, and I absolutely was so impressed with the commitment of you know, to the cause, essentially. And as it's back to something I said earlier on, you know, there's never been a problem with local demand for waste and resources management. Never been a problem. The problem has always been that the global level, the mechanisms at the global level have never really taken this sector seriously. It's always been an orphan sector. And only over the last few years has it become more beginning to be more mainstreamed in development thinking. So I certainly hope you get an easier run than I have over the last 33 years, and you get a good flow of consistent. All right, so someone's got their microphone on. That's very nice to hear the voice. But just by the way, do you know what a ton of organic waste looks like? Well, it looks a bit like that. Okay, that's about a ton. All right, probably a little bit less. Okay, I probably need to switch the microphone off for someone. So that's about a ton. You know, when we talk about tons, it's important to understand what we're talking about. You know, so we talk about 1,000 tons. That's quite a lot, isn't it? Really, of organics. Okay. Oh, and by the way, do you know what a kilogram of plastics, in this case hard plastics, looks like? Well, that's a kilogram, 1 kilogram. Obviously, look, you know, so a ton of plastics is an enormous volume of hard plastics. Okay. So volume-wise, you see, you know, one of the things that, you know, if you compare those two things, you know, you'd probably fit like maybe maximum 30 of those bags in that ton there, 30 kilograms of, you know, or maybe 50. Talking about volume and weight of materials, very different. Okay. And that essentially is that bag of hard plastics was pretty much just fit in a chair, you know. It's like a middle-aged person's torso, average, sitting in a chair, you know. That's a kilogram of plastics. So just wanted to give you that little nugget. And then essentially to wrap up, I've got maybe a little bit early. What have we learned? I mean, first of all, I didn't write it on here, but let me say one thing. The more you know, the less you understand. Our work, our field of work, is a professional field of work. The more I am involved in this professional field of work, the more I rely on specialists who really know what they're talking about for specific things. And as I said, I'm not a data scientist. I know people that are. Every project is different. The objectives, the funding, the partners, the location, the geospatial issues, the topographical issues, the weather. Every project is different. You have to adapt methodologies, tailoring methodologies. These global standard methodologies are not scripts. They are meant as resources to be used and practically used, but adapted. If a bit of it doesn't work, then you don't have to do it. Focus it. Focus on the bits that meet your objectives. Focus on capturing the evidence needed to that you can afford in terms of budget, that you have the time scale to do, and provide you the evidence, the data providing the evidence, which will make the change or bring the case onto the table. Quantities, as I've said, are often more important than composition. You can spend too much time doing composition and not enough time doing quantities. Data collection catalyzes engagement. Every time we're out in the field, when you do primary data collection, what you're doing is the first stage of a participatory process. And it's only participatory processes that make changes at local levels, at the community level. So data collection catalyzes that type of engagement. It's more than just the data itself. It engages, it mobilizes people. It's a self-fulfilling, self-reinforcing good thing to do. And bottom line, at the end of the day, primary data collection is fun. It is good fun. It can be pretty hard work. And I'm hoping that my colleagues, Nicole, and I know Nicole's probably around, and Maya. Nicole's on the far left. Maya is on the second from left. And the Tunisia team are the other three. Very recent survey done last month of the coastline in Tunisia. And that's it for me.
Well, thank you very much, Andy, for giving us the journey starting from Philippines to Uganda and end in Lebanon. I wish we could have more time to start from Lebanon and go to somewhere else. Although Lebanon is a beautiful country, but we need more information about waste in different corners. Now, and thank you for gifting us like 5-6 minutes for questions. Now I would like to ask you the questions we received on YouTube as well as on the Zoom chat box. The first question is from Natalie Pano. It is about the slide number 6. She's asking, yesterday in similar slides, the food waste value was different. Is this done in different country? Because you mentioned, Andy, the food waste was 470 grams per capita per day.
Yeah, every place is different. So that's just taken. That's a snapshot taken. I didn't let you know where that data was coming from. There are multiple. The Wastewise Cities tool has been implemented in over 50 cities, and within. I haven't got an update from my friends in UN Habitat, but I'm anticipating that that'll be over 100 before too long. So it's just a different data, different cities, different location.
Okay, so we will stay on the slide number 6. The question is from Paul Sanders. Good morning. Thank you a lot for the insights. how are the food waste losses estimated? Which is very similar question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, food waste losses comes from the WFD. Actually, the food waste losses has to be thought of in two different dimensions. First of all, food once it has been placed, losses after it's been placed on the market. So the losses from the consumption side, essentially from the waste management system, and the food losses prior to that in the food production chains. The food losses, I think, you know, there are many studies, and over the last few years, the spotlight shone on massive food losses, which are due to unreasonable specifications of major food purchasing companies. But I can only talk about, I don't get involved in that. I'm not specialized in the pre-waste part. And the food losses in the back end of the system are derived from waste flow diagram, which is linked to the WACT. Essentially, you get your quantities, you get the quantities generated, the quantities captured at facilities. You are able, with composition analysis at the front and back end, to make triangulation of the losses inherent in the food waste itself. There are moisture losses as well, which are difficult to understand because in a hot climate, the food waste will dry out. So you can lose up to 20–30% of the total quantity tonnage from that. In a wet climate or a wet season, you can get the opposite effect. So it's as I said, it's a tough area. Don't worry too much about it. Just please get involved and improve data, improve our methodologies and our understanding.
Thank you. On behalf, before I go to the second questions, someone asked you, Amosat, his name, dear Andy Whiteman, you should add in that list Mozambique. You have
yeah, great place to work. We just finished a nice project there. I didn't personally, because I don't speak Portuguese, but my colleagues do. Mozambique has had a lot of work going on in solid waste management in over quite a long period of time, actually. Yeah, I agree.
But you might need 2 or 3 slides to include all the countries in this case.
Probably we'll be a long time sitting together. Let's put it that way.
Maybe for the future events. So the next question is on YouTube from Shipo Mohadi. I apologize if I pronounce it another way. I'm fascinated to know about Waste-Wise Cities tool. Is it available to every city?
Yeah, you go onto the UN Habitat, just type in your search engine Waste-Wise Cities tool UN Habitat. You'll get linked on. There's loads of resources. There's videos. There's training course. You can get stuck in. Go for it.
So we still have 10 minutes for questions, and I would like you, Andy, to have 1 to 1.5 minutes to answer each question. So we will go through all the questions. The next question is about slide number 10. Natalie Pano, I think the same, she asked the first question. A sustainable development goal indicator, 3 slide. What was the reference for this figure?
I can't remember the slide. I haven't got it on the screen. What's the reference for SDG 1161?
It was a figure of a tree where you were.
Oh yes. Yeah, if you type in, that's my paper. I wrote that. I created that graphic with a nice graphic designer. The 9 development bands, a conceptual framework and global theory for waste and development. And I was very lucky. Well, you can see it. No, you can't quite see it there.
No, we cannot see
anyway,
it.
I was really honoured. I got an award for that paper last year. It was really lovely. So the 9 development bands, a conceptual framework and global theory for waste and development. Type in my name and you'll please enjoy.
The next question is from Joseph Huang. who should be responsible for solid waste management recycling facility financing, central government, local government, or private equity?
Good question. Responsibility, there are several functions which are inherent in providing waste management service. So responsibility depends on which function you're talking about. Generally speaking, for recycling facilities, materials recovery facilities, etc., generally speaking, well, they are working within a largely private value chain, the recycling value chain. So most effectively, the operator function should be assigned to private sector, in my opinion. What we call the client or employer function, the organization that ensures that those facilities are adequate and sufficient, depends on whether you have an extended producer responsibility system in place and exactly how that extended producer responsibility system is designed. If you don't have an EPR system in place, then the responsibility by default falls to the municipalities. Depending on the country you're in, it may be, a different tier of government. But the revenue collector function, which is another important one, really you need the operators of the facilities to realize the benefits of their work in order to basically maximize the tonnage recovery. So again, the revenue collector. But you very often as soon as already a lot of the higher value materials are being extracted anyway, so we're only left with the lower value materials. So very often some public subsidy by a contract under an operator working under a contract with a price stabilization, an amount of money to ensure that in the times when the oil prices drop, the whole system doesn't collapse, is needed, and that is one of the reasons of having extended producer responsibility.
So just to share the last question from my side and then open the session so the participants can unmute themselves and ask questions. But the last one is about the slide 6. Again, how are the uncollected waste estimated from Arleta?
Yes, uncollected waste is estimated by a formula which is total generated waste, which is a multiplication of the kilograms per capita per day generated total, captured from the point of generation, not the point of disposal, minus the tonnages which are evidenced as being received at recovery facilities, making sure and being careful to not double count by counting the same material twice in two different facilities. So you need to go to the apex facility, what we call it, in the apex of the chain, the best you can find in the city, minus the quantities which are evidenced as being received at disposal. In the WACT, waste collection is defined as complete waste collection service. That means the waste which is collected does end up at a designated or a recognized recovery or disposal facility. If it's not, then we cannot evidence that, and that goes down as uncollected waste.
Thank you. I think it was a very good explanation and emphasizing what has been discussed yesterday at the end of the day by Shiza, our colleague from UN Habitat, and also Flavio. It has been discussed yesterday about this topic, and in the next session we will also discuss further. Now I would like to open the floor, so if anybody have questions, can ask can Andy directly. And there are also some notes or some further questions regarding if you could have the study report about the Lebanese marine litter or about the informal sector in Pakistan, we will share with Andy, and you will get feedback after the presentation in the next day or weeks. But now I will open the floor if anybody has question, can just unmute and ask.
Hello.
Hi, we can hear
Hello,
you.
am I
Go
audible?
ahead. Go ahead.
So my name is Vishnu from India. So thank you for sharing your experience and about the details which you have shared, that valuable thing which you have shared. So some couple of questions I just want to I just want to understand something about a WAC tool and also some other things also. So I think like in the WAC tool, like just before the question was like the calculation of the waste which we will be collecting, or the corporation or the government authority or private authority will be collecting, like we can take weight, or we can take the composition or characterization of the waste from a recovery facility which have its own like resources, baling machine or anything will be there in recovery facility, that we can do. But other than that, in the collected waste itself, if we are putting the waste in a disposal facility or a landfill, then how can we take a weight or take a characterization of the waste? Uncontrolled or uncollected waste, we can't do anything. It's just an estimate. It's just an assumption which we will be taking from the collected waste. That is for sure. But for in the collected waste itself, when we dispose the waste in a landfill, how can we characterize the waste? One thing. And the second question is, if WAC tool have some GPS facility, or like it's because the collection and the logistic supply chain management of the waste is very important in different parts of the world, because it's a scam in many parts. Lot of lobbies are working working there, different parts of our world. So it's very important that we have to understand that properly it is maintained, or the logistics part is maintained properly, so that WAC is having GPS facility or not. Just want to understand that. And in between you, yeah, in between you asked about told about some PDF or some study which we can download freely. That I didn't get the name of the material, so that's also.
All right. Okay.
And just one thing.
I won't be able to remember so many questions, mate. I'm 55 years old.
Sorry.
I can't. I'm trying to remember the questions, so too many questions doesn't work for me.
Sorry.
Right?
Yeah,
I'd like to help you with the first question, right? In particular, because you made an assumption which I would like to try to encourage you to rethink. And that you said it's not possible, that's for sure, that we can collect data from uncollected waste. Well, then that's not true, actually. That there is a systemic lack of understanding of waste generated in low income and slum communities, as I said. And you can collect data. It's just you have to go house to house. And that is what WACT Step 2 does. So WACT Step 2 does primary data collection from different income. It stratifies in different income or in different housing type areas, okay? And you can, and you should, and in my view, it should take the larger proportion of your budget or for the surveys rather than the smaller. You should try to fill the data gap for uncollected waste, because that is the largest source of the problem, which we experience both in terms of pollution to the environment, whether it's water, land, or air. The second thing is, at the point once the waste is collected, then during that collection chain, during the point of generation, at the point of storage, prior to collection, and during the collection services, there are either itinerant recyclers or collection crews operating in the system which are extracting materials. So by definition, as soon as if you do a composition at the point of recovery or at the point of sorting at where you got your baler, as you said, then you're already missing some stuff, or you may only be cherry picking certain types of waste which has been sent to that recovery facility. So a composition at the point of recovery is good, but that's what the materials, it's going to give you information data of the materials going for recovery. Materials going for disposal, step 6 of the WACT is basically all about that. And so download the WACT, get onto UN Habitat and on your browser, download Wastewise Cities tool, UN Habitat, check out step 2, check out step 6, okay, in order to address that one. The other issues about political economy of different things is massive, and certainly is in India, and it is everywhere, and India is not alone in that.
Well, the last...
So, like, as WAC tool have GPS facility or not?
I didn't quite, sorry, could you say it again?
GPS.
GPS.
Understanding the, yeah.
Yeah, of course. You know, electronic data is vital, but only if it's used.
So if there are more questions, you can write down your questions in the chat box. We will definitely send it to Andy, and we will get back you with the responses for all the details you need about any topics. The last question is coming from Friha. So Friha, you can unmute yourself and ask the question, and you have maximum 1 minute. So you decide if you ask 1 or 2 questions. And Andy, it will be nice if you answer it just shortly because you're running out. Priha, can you unmute yourself, please? Or because you are raising hand, or maybe it was by mistake. So we are waiting for you 5 seconds.
Oh, more hands have come up.
So Arletta was the first one. So we will take Arletta at the last questions. And Mosa, I apologize for you. Please write down your questions. We will get answers.
Just missed out there, Musa. Sorry. Arletta. You're on mute, Arletta.
Please unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask my question, please?
Mosa.
Much for the next presentation. I will go quickly with my question. It was really interesting to know more about the UN Habitat tool. I would like to ask a question, which I think is mostly common for African country. I'm from Rwanda. I think Africa has a very important informal sector or uncollected waste, and a bigger informal sector compared to the municipal collected waste, solid waste. So I would like to know, what should these African countries do with this informal sector? What should be the move or the advice to the municipalities to do with this informal sector? Is it a good thing? We need to formalize them, or we need to stop it, or is it a good thing? Because I realize it have a contribution, but again, you cannot get data from them.
Right. Good question. As you heard, I enjoy Central Africa very much. Informal sector play an absolutely vital role in many places, including many cities and secondary towns in Africa and elsewhere, all over the world. Actually, the informal sector provide the only services, essentially, in many cases, depending on where you are. Work with, try to not use the term formalize, instead use the term integrate, because there's formalization implies risks, sometimes personal risks and risks to income. Try to use the term integration. There's an enormous amount of work that is needed to understand the incentive structures inside the informal movement materials. Often certainly in the case of the Ugandan municipalities I mentioned, it was a lot for animal food, actually. So the organics were finding their way into the value chains for food supply for animals, and understanding the incentives there, and recognizing essentially and valuing the contribution of the informal sector. And at the end of the day, let's just call it private sector. The taxation status of somebody is not a waste management issue. So I would encourage engagement, integration, and respect.
Thank you very much for all the participants to the questions, as well as for Andy to share your experience and answering the questions. Be ready for some more questions. You will receive it per email. We promised our audience to provide the answers. For now, I wish you a nice Saturday, which is weekend for you. Maybe you'll enjoy it. Your breakfast.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for listening, and very best of luck and good health to you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye. So we had many questions about uncollected waste. And I am pretty sure you will receive some of the answers in the next session, because we have the second speaker, Flavio Pop. He will discuss the common challenges about rain degradation of waste and various points of aggregates, such as landfill. He promised us yesterday also during the last questions session at the end of the day. So he will focus also how the waste find its way in the water bodies, which was more related to the uncollected questions today. So Flavio, you can share your screen, and just to get an idea who Flavio is, he is working for Gupa Infra company and as a senior consultant in waste management and circular economy. He has more than 10 years of professional experience in the waste sector and resource management, but of course, circular economy and climate change, working for many organizations, industries, and national government. I cannot introduce you within 2 minutes because our speakers have a long experience all. So Flavio, if you want to introduce you further in your slides, just you can do it, or you can, the floor is yours. You can start now.
Thank you very much. And can you just confirm that you can see the slides and you can hear me well?
We can see it.
Oh, okay, excellent. Okay, so hello everybody. It's nice being here today with you. Actually, my session is a little bit different. There was a change in the scope. So I'll be presenting about system design and interventions and business case development, starting from the waste data. Yeah, a few things about me. I worked for about 6 years actually with Andy and in RWA, Andy and his colleagues. So I had the chance to work with one of the best experts in this industry. So I'm very much grateful for that. After my experience with RWA, I went to West Africa. I lived and worked there for about 2 years. Worked for FCDO and implemented a project in Sierra Leone. And then afterwards, I came back home. By the way, I'm based in Romania and started working with UN Habitat. I worked for about 1 year with the Waste-Wise Cities team and implemented the walked waste flow diagram in particular in Africa and Southeast Asia, quite some cities and countries. It was really nice experience. Then worked for GIZ International Services in the Mediterranean region, looking at plastic leakages and business cases for plastic recovery. And since almost 2 years, I'm with Gupa Infra, which is a German consultancy firm. And here we are also doing some nice, very nice and interesting projects. Right now, we are implementing pilot projects in Southeast Asia and also having some interesting assignments in Latin America. So A few things about my presentation. Let's get started. I think we have 30 minutes. With my presentation here, we take a step further to see how data fits in the system design and business case development. So you will not only see a presentation about waste data. So my plan is to give you a few insights about what a business case should consist of and outline the importance and role of waste data in this process. And this is not meant to be a comprehensive presentation of this topic. It's an example, a possible approach for a business case. So I will explain more in the next slides. Okay, yeah. So this is just an overview of the presentation. A lot has been said about waste data, so we'll go quickly through this, and I'll spend most of my time talking about the business case development stages and with, if we have time, with a few considerations about collaboration with the informal sector. We might go a little bit beyond the scope of the training, which is, you know, characterization, audits, waste generation studies. However, having this overview of what project development entails will help you realize how important is waste data in this process. So, and in which phases the data comes in and how we can use it to make decisions and increase confidence in our approach. This very nice statement, simple yet comprehensive. I will read it for you. So,
Flavio, you are muted. Would you please unmute yourself? It was just directly. Now you can start reading.
Okay. So I will read this for you. Measurement is the first step that leads to control and eventually to improvement. If you can't measure something, you can't understand it. If you can't understand it, you can't control it. If you can't control it, you can't improve it. So this is Professor James Harrington. And actually the idea comes from a former colleague of mine, Andy's colleague, Brian, who used to present this, to show this during our trainings on waste data management and greenhouse gas emissions. So I decided to do the same. I like it very much. So I'm constantly using it since the first time I saw it. Now let's move on. So data, yeah. Why do we need data? A lot has been said. We'll go quickly through this. So we need to understand waste management systems. We need data to support businesses, governments to make, they need the data to make informed decisions. Data informs strategic decisions, technological choices, system design, operator models. And if we don't have data, how we can determine the success or failure, yeah, of any project. The previous sessions talked a lot about the various data sets, the generation, recovery, composition for projects. Andy discussed in his presentation about the different focus that the project might have. Yeah, so a project requires a comprehensive understanding of the whole system. So including here all the elements which define the system and interact within the system. So the typical data, which is reported by existing methodologies, WACT, WFD, national protocols, yeah. Remember Andy's example in the Philippines, which I'm also experiencing right now in one project. So with more requirements with respect to waste composition, waste generation analysis. Is the same situation in Indonesia, where they have clear protocols, slightly different for conducting WACs, in particular for non-household sources. So, you know, every time we need to adapt, we need to adjust, we need to tailor our approach, we might need further interpretation, further breakdown in the data generation. So it all depends on the project design requirements. For example, a project in, let's see, a project, for example, about plastic leakages might require more information about the polymers, the type of products, the brands maybe. So that can be collected. Our approach can be adjusted, and then we can collect the data during the surveys. Then you might have a project coming from the climate change side, and that requires an understanding of the organic waste sources, quantities, food waste, greens, etc. But the project design, project development stages expand beyond the pure waste data. So the so-called enabling environment for any project, and that consists of many elements. We are looking here at the legal framework, technical aspects, environmental, climate change issues, socioeconomic background, finance elements, etc. Every time there is no standard approach here, right? So for every project, there might be other elements to consider, such as the donor requirements, national, local requirements, priorities, and last but not least, not any intervention is feasible. So many interventions are not technically, financially viable, and we can observe that early in the process. So with some experience, we can apply some experience, we can realize what could work, what could not work. And there might be other elements here, to consider. So what is a business case? It provides transparency, in the analysis to support the investment decisions. And generally a business case must align with strategic objectives, and is basically our core management tool to inform investment decisions. I mentioned earlier, and Andy mentioned it in his presentation about the waste analysis, and it's the same situation here. So there is no universal framework for a business case development process. However, a few elements must be touched upon by any type or any form of business model. So my presentation will outline a few considerations with respect to the different development stages. It is not intended to cover all the policy obligations or international best practices or donor requirements. So the level of analysis pretty much varies each time depending on the complexity of your proposal. So this is an example and interpretation of a business case design process. Yes, there are many tools which can help you guide the analysis, business case documentation. You might have to follow very strict requirements for private investors, like commercial banks, commercial debt providers. You might want to develop an unsolicited proposal for a grant funding, which might not require an advanced financial analysis, but you might need a concept design, a soft financial analysis. So there are many elements to consider here. I think that's the point. But the starting point in planning your business case design process is to understand the donor requirements or whoever is funding your project. National requirements usually are minimum requirements in case there is an international agency involved there. So these are, I identified the 4 stages for the purpose of this presentation. We start with a problem statement. So this provides a description of a problem that you want to solve, and taking time to work on this problem statement is great to reduce the tendency to rush to solutions. It helps you to make sure you're focusing on the right problem and have a well-informed understanding of the root causes. Unfortunately, there are many challenges to address in waste management from which you can choose from. In most cases, a project tackles a myriad of challenges. We can easily identify challenges. I heard it, you've heard it. For example, there is a lack of finance, there is a lack of infrastructure. However, a thorough understanding of these challenges requires a more comprehensive analysis. So remember the statement in the beginning, measurement is key. The question is how we can measure the magnitude of each problem so we can understand it, control it, and ultimately to improve it. So, of course, what has been presented in this training earlier in terms of waste composition, generation, methodologies, protocols, is essential to define these challenges, quantify them, inform the solution finding process, and etc. Stage 2 is a strategic assessment where we list some potential ideas that could resolve the problem. I just want to say that the analysis within a proposal in the different stages is not really a linear process. So some activities, some assessments will inform or refine other assessments. So for example, information developed in section in stage 2 or 3 will link to other sections and etc. So yeah, as I said, in stage 2, what we do is we identify possible interventions relevant to the problem identified, and by means of multi-criteria analysis, we filter interventions to a short list. Yeah, and then we take the short list into the next stage, into a further assessment. So, for example, we have here some typical stages or phases in the service, in the value chain, depending on where your these are depending on where your project is located, yeah, in the waste management system. So we have here waste generation and collection in the supply part. We have treatment such as composting, recycling, recovery, and we have disposal. And what we do, we create a long list of potential interventions under each of these stages, yeah. After we create this long list, we must document we must document the technical, environmental, financial, legal, institutional, and other aspects related to any of these interventions. So again, this is not meant to be a complete assessment framework. So it's an example. So please always follow the donor, the government requirements, as there might be different conditions to satisfy during the business case development. So of course, I mean, WACs are critical during this stage to inform the long list of interventions and help with the multi-criteria analysis. For example, high-tech facilities which require large volumes of feedstock to achieve economies of scale could be excluded if the project is a small scale project. And how do we measure the scale of the project? By means of the protocols and standards, methodologies that we've seen in this training. Preferably, the multi-criteria analysis should be done as thorough, as comprehensive as possible. However, it depends on the resources available and the requirements, the donor requirements. So this is a nice example which I used to present during consultations with key stakeholders. The source is the Global Waste Management Outlook. I know the data is not recent, it's outdated. So there might be, I'm sure there is more recent data available online. So you might have national data from current or recent projects. Andy mentioned earlier about the development ban. So have a look there. I will also do it. That might be a nice tool to help you screen interventions. So the idea is to use evidence like this data showed here on this slide to screen the long list and exclude the options which have a very low probability of being successful or viable. So we can take an example. We have here operating cost per tons for different stages and different countries, different technologies. So for example, if you are in a low income country with a very low collection rate, and even the collection which is done is not reliable, and the cost that will cost you per ton between 20 and 50 US dollar. You might reconsider the idea of having a waste to energy plant, which will cost you between 95 and 120 tons per dollars per ton, right? So if you don't have today 20 or 50 dollars per ton to collect your waste, how can you afford an advanced facility? So it's really nice to show this kind of evidence during consultation, so to screen through the different options. And of course other examples, you can use other examples here. Options analysis. Yeah, so this is the next stage. Basically, we take the shortlisted interventions from the strategic assessment into an options analysis. So here we develop 2-3 viable options, potential options, and then we do a further analysis. We drill down into the analysis, and then in the end we select the preferred option. So stakeholder engagement during the options analysis is critical to the quality of the options generated. So these consultations, engagement always support, we understand better the stakeholders' perceptions of the service need. We understand better the potential demand and commercial considerations, and we can secure social acceptance for the project option. So please always prioritize engagements during this stage. Again, we have an example here based on a list of potential interventions. So after shortlisted, we can define which interventions from each stage can form a project, an option. Yeah. So here we have, for example, 2 options, 1-1 and then 1-2. After we defined our options, the next step is to evaluate them, and we do it through a multi-criteria assessment. This time we drill down more into the analysis. So building, of course, on the analysis done in the previous stage. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Of course, here again, the data from WAC, WFD, WABIs, or other WAC results help us to really go through this assessment. For example, we look at the technical elements here. How can we determine the input-output capacities if we don't have data? In terms of environmental aspects, how can we determine the climate mitigation potential, diversion potential, informal sector, for example, impacts or collaborations, community acceptance issues if we don't have data? How can we estimate the CapEx, OpEx revenue streams? How can we understand the legal implications, like in terms of licensing, monitoring, evaluation, environmental and social impact assessments, and etc. Yeah, and then with the preferred option, we go into the last stage, which is the detailed business case. From the options analysis stage, we can draw important conclusions, recommendations on the viability of the preferred option. key activities or thresholds that need to be achieved before the proposal goes ahead. What are the issues or risks, the time frames, timing, and other arrangements. So during this stage, we look at the preferred option, and then we go into more details again. So the content of the detailed business case may vary depending on the funding requirements. So again, please check the requirements in the beginning, plan your assessment process accordingly. So these are the typical components is an example, yeah. So but as I said earlier, in any project, there are some key elements which need to be considered. So you will always need to define your project on a technical level, to do a financial analysis, affordability, to check the affordability, to look at the operator models, procurement strategies, legal compliance assessment, risks and mitigation plans, and monitoring evaluation or meal plan, right? To have a meal plan in place. So, but again, the depth of this and the content of all these points, that it really depends on and it varies from one project to another.
Flavio, sorry for interruption. We have officially 5 minutes, but we can also give you 5 more minutes. So in total, you have about 10 minutes. That's
sure.
To know.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Okay, I'll move quickly. I don't have too many slides left. So on a technical level, yeah, we need to understand the waste flows, the mass balances. That will help us to understand the equipment needs, facility construction needs. If there is construction involved, we might need to carry out concept or detailed engineering designs, identify sites for the project, procurement strategy. So of course, I mean, the methodologies and waste protocols and etc. that will really help us to go through this step. As I said, I just gave some examples. We can estimate number, types of bins, skips, containers, trucks, etc. Informal sector activities, understand them, design equipments to favor them, for example, or even take into account gender considerations. In terms of the financial plan, a well-articulated plan provides a good understanding, a clear understanding of the financial costs, the revenues, the risks on the project, and then eventually it gives us some insights on the project viability. What this analysis should include. So we are looking at all revenues and costs, capital, operating costs, summary of revenues. There might be some advanced financial analysis required here, depending on the funding conditions. We have to look at the budgetary impacts, potential government, local, national funding sources, international funding, grants, loans, etc. So this is pretty much it. In terms of affordability, I think we've all seen projects developed and never reaching the operating stage, or projects operating as long as funding has been provided, external funding. So the affordability analysis should, we must develop an analysis to allow decision makers to see whether the option is affordable, over the whole of its life. So funding is needed for both the initial costs, the construction, if there is construction involved, and the ongoing maintenance and operation. So the investment then can be funded upfront or over time through a series of repayments. This stage is really, really critical in evaluating the sustainability of the project. So what happens, for example, after the project is done, or our involvement is done if we are an agency supporting a government to develop a project. So what is our exit strategy? Who will take over the infrastructure, and then under what conditions? Who will pay for the ongoing maintenance and operation? So these are critical points. In terms of operator models, we must address all the managerial aspects related to the project, financial flows, roles, responsibilities between different players in the system. For example, if the collection system, if we are covering collection through our project, that must be part of an integral as part of the overall collection system. Right. So if the project collaborates with a transfer system, for example, transfer facilities managed by other operators, by the municipalities, a private operator contracted by a municipality, then we would need to clarify and agree on the contractual arrangements with that transfer facility, and so on. Same for the landfill site, and then same for example, for secondary materials and so on. So all these elements must be clarified. In terms of procurement, we are looking at the capital expenditure, and then both the construction and operational phases. Yeah. So there are various strategies in place depending on the complexity of the project. So design and build, build, operate, etc. So these elements must be clarified from the onset, because they might have an impact on the overall project timeline. So, for example, donor procurement procedures, and you might have donor procurement procedures. Yeah, you might have procedures for the agency who's implementing the project. If you are working for such an agency, there are municipal national procedures. So you might have, for example, a project funded by FCDO and then implemented by UN Habitat in Lagos. So there are many policies, safeguard policies, procurement policies to take into account. Risks and risk and mitigation plan. This is, of course, important, and it's not should not be done just to tick a box. So all the risks identified here and the mitigation measures should be then an integral part of the project. So you might have procedures in place, roles assigned, the responsibilities assigned to manage those risks and implement those mitigations measures later in the project. And of course, the M&E meal plan here, data is essential. For example, if we have a project coming from the climate side, for example, we have to, for example, in this graph here, you can see these are emissions from a landfill site, from the waste going into the landfill site, greenhouse gas emissions. So this is a baseline, these are baseline emissions. So during the project implementation, we have to track down and the volumes, for example, diverted from the landfill site. What is the composition of that waste? So we can determine the impact, of our project, the avoided emissions, And same, for example, if we have a plastic project coming from the plastic leakage side, if we work with the waste flow diagram to set up our baseline, the same methodology can be used later on to see what is actually the progress, the impact of our project. There might be other assessments as well. It depends really on the type of the project, the funding, etc. In terms of targets, it's really important to don't get too ambitious. Please allow your project, give time to your project to grow, to consolidate. So you might not be, you might need to rely on, for sure you will rely on collaborations with different operators, with different stakeholders. So take that into account. It takes time to consolidate all those relations. Okay, in terms of informal sector, maybe just I will just say a few words using this slide, and then I will stop so we can then discuss some questions. So I am not an expert, yes, on informal sector, not a financial specialist. For example, with respect to the informal sector, I just wanted to say that it's a very peculiar topic. Yeah, so consultations are key. Make sure you work with the informal sector, you co-design, you co-implement activities, work with experts. I think that's the advice. Yeah, so for example, sociologists with a good understanding of waste management, they can prove to be most effective in engaging with the informal sector. Experts really who have done this before. So work with them, yeah, because it requires really skills and competencies in, social inclusion, gender equity, occupational health and safety, and etc. So I think I will stop here, and then looking forward to your questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Flavio, for the very clear slides and very goal-oriented. We have got some questions, but since we are already running out of time, we take only 2 questions. And as I told Andy before, Flavio, just be ready to get some questions per email, and kindly asking you to provide us with the responses.
Sure, no problem.
The first question is from Shmita. How is the option analysis done? Could you please explain how? And would be nice, Flavio, if you could try at least to summarize the answer within 1 minute or maximum 90 seconds.
Yeah. So, I mean, the idea is, as I said, I think what is important is to consider a broad range of potential interventions here, right? So you don't rush into a solution. So it shows that you did your homework, you investigated the potential interventions, and then you selected the best one, right? So as I said, during the options analysis, it's really important to develop a few options, yeah, for your project. And then to really conduct a thorough assessment. So at the end, you understand, what are the technical implications, the financial implications, and the legal and so on, environmental, social for each scenario, right? So then you can select the best one, because what you don't want to do, for example, is you develop a project. You do your engagements there, you start implementing activities, you start collaborating, yeah, with the different stakeholders. And then, in 1 or 2 years, you end up in a meeting or in a workshop with someone from the Ministry of Environment, and you get the question, for example, why we didn't consider a waste to energy facility here, why we are why is our project about waste collection, waste transfer, about dump site rehabilitation, and not about waste to energy, right? So you basically then you can document, you can show your documentation, you can show that you did your homework, you analyze the different interventions, and then this scenario, this option is the most viable. So that's why you went for it. So basically, as I said, there is no standard approach here, I think. So whatever you think it makes sense to address your problem, you should develop 2 or 3 options, and then really compare it, yeah, on different levels, and then you select the best one. I hope that answered your question. Sorry.
The second very practical question is, from Lina Astuti, does waste management have to be profitable If it's so, what is the acceptable of the rate of return?
Well, I mean, the acceptable rate of return, I don't know if I can answer this. And in terms of profit, I think, it shouldn't be profitable. It's really, I keep hearing waste management is a business, especially in low income countries. And then, I see many times very ambitious people who would like to embark on high-tech solutions. And but really, I mean, what we really need to think is that there are many costs associated with waste management, and I think the objective is how can we generate revenues to cover for those costs, so we can have a reliable service in place. I think we should start with that. How we can have reliable collection services, transfer, disposal, then we can move into recovery, different recovery options, etc. So I think before we look at profits and margins, we really need to look at the service side and make sure that we provide reliable services. Of course, in terms of profits, you can have this discussion in the private sector. If for example, if municipalities, governments provide the environment for private businesses to thrive, so yeah, you can discuss about profits there. But then in the service chain, I think it's more about services and really having reliable services in place.
Flavio, from ISWA Young Professional Group, we would like to have you in the future also. And thank you for today's session. In the future, you might ask we may ask you to focus on the original idea of today's presentation about, as Paul Sanders mentioned that in the chat box, about common challenges, rain degradation of waste, and focusing also some aspects of landfill. But for today, it was a great presentation with some practical examples and some evaluation for strategies. So now we are going to make a very short break, and if you agree with me, I would like to just say 5 minutes. If anybody is disagree, can just raise hand, and I'm pretty sure nobody is going to do it. So we will meet us in 5 minutes. It means at 10:44. So you have 5 minutes to get a coffee, tea, or a glass of water, or eat something very fast, or bring it to the laptop, and we'll meet you in 5 minutes. Hello from here again, and welcome back to the last presentation of the webinar. I would just confirm if Dr. Mansour is here.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Mansour is here. Welcome. And thank you for your time today for the second presentation. So I would like to ask my colleague Shiza or Hania if they could share your presentation. Otherwise, can you also do yourself, Dr. Nasur, or you are not the host, the organizer?
I'm
Uh,
doing it.
Okay, she's us here. Otherwise, they could do also that. Well, till she's sharing the presentation, yesterday Dr. Nasur was introduced for this who participated yesterday. He was introduced by my colleague Maria, and today I would like him to introduce himself. Dr. Mansour, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Welcome everybody. Can you make it full screen? So I'm sure a number of you were here yesterday when we discussed about waste collection parameters and circular economy expectations. My name is Mansoor Ali. I'm based in the UK. I'm team lead for the Royal Academy of Engineering and do a number of other assignments. I have experience of 35 years in waste management and international development and worked in many countries across the world. So I have a keen interest in this topic. And when organizers approached me, I said this topic is very much close to my heart because of two reasons. One is this specific topic is a very important opportunities for all young professionals who would like to work in waste management. Can you hear me? Oh, I think
we can hear you, but it would be nice if you unmute yourself. If you have anything, you can write it down in the chat box.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Dr. Nasur, you can go ahead. She's unmuting. Dr. Mansour, yes,
yeah, okay.
you're unmuted.
Okay, that's fine. There is a sound in between, I think from Sunday Odobo.
Yes, and
Can you mute Sunday's microphone, please?
He's muted now. You
Okay,
can
thank you.
apologize.
Yeah, okay. So we have limited time. Let's focus on the topic. So I worked and this topic is very important. I think there's a disturbance from somebody's microphone. Can you just ask the participants? But I think it's Sunday's microphone.
Sunday Odobu, if you could hear me, would you please mute yourself? Sunday Odobu, thank you very much. If you would have done it. So now, yes, now we can
go. Yeah, so this is very important opportunities for young professionals because there's a lot to be done and not many methods and tools are effectively working at the moment, and we will be talking about those challenges. I think part of it, somebody like me who worked in the sector for 35 years, it's also a constant challenge or partly frustration because whatever very important global reports you see, feasibility studies, students' work, there are certain key gaps, and the gaps have got some causes, and we will be talking about one of those gaps. So it's also very important that the young professionals think about this topic very, very carefully. I think we will. Oh dear.
I apologize for the inconvenience, Dr. Nasur. I cannot mute. So She's just taking
Okay. So I think they so this one is the, sorry, it takes away my train of thought. So this topic is very important. And yeah, one thing which I wanted to say is we will take all your questions. All your questions are very important, but questions related to this topic, we will answer first. And other questions generally on waste management, if I can answer based on my knowledge and experience, we will try to do. The idea is we finish this presentation in less than 30 minutes. So you have at least 30 minutes for questions and answer. So can we go to the next slide, please? So we discussed this very briefly yesterday. These are the common parameters for waste data collection, which includes generation rates, physical composition, bulk density, moisture, and chemical composition, and other requirements. These are key for any feasibility study, any system design, selection of the landfill sites, and these are commonly attempted or reported. One thing which is very common in waste management assignments, that when you collect data and information, there are three common challenges. One is there is always less time to collect the data because the client needs the data in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 1 week. So you are not given enough time for the data collection. And second is because there is less resources to spend on data collection. So because the majority, that's a sector problem in the sector. Majority of people don't understand the importance of the data, and so they allocate less time on larger program development, major decisions, while there are separate very big programs on data collection only, with or without a purpose. But in many common projects, you have very little time and resources to collect the data. And third issue is the continuity and or the snapshot. In majority of cases, you are asked to collect snapshot data, and there is no continuity, especially on the city level data. There is less ownership on the data, and there's less sharing of the data. So some of those things are very common, and keeping in mind those common things, we will be talking one aspect on this range of challenges, and I will give you some guidance on how to handle that particular challenge. Yeah? And you can ask questions also. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? So what happens normally in practice, that you end up forcing a small sample of household, which may be 20, 30, 40. There are also always questions about how many households should be sampled. You start with the household. You then extrapolate that data for a city, also for very big decisions. So people spend a lot of time on extrapolation and very less time on actual data collection. And then you multiply it with population to get a city level data. You often use a growth rate for both waste and population. And then you assign percentages on different waste streams, again, based on lots of assumptions. So yes, there is a stream of commercial waste, there's a stream of market waste, there's a stream of something else, and you assign percentages. And there are very few methods, validated methods about what percentage we assign to which waste stream. And then you report this year. Sometime you also generate tables and maps for future years. So although you do this, but remember that your basis of doing all these extrapolation at the city level is household sample. Now, the cause of this challenge is we adopt Western methods of data collection without thinking about situations in developing countries. And what I'm talking today is all of it is about developing and low-income countries, right? So in developed countries, you have separate land use, you have clearly separated waste streams. They are not mixed in many cases, and you have reliable population data and some reliable figures on growth and other things. When we import those methods into developing countries, we assign those numbers without much thinking about the situation on the ground. So the challenge is you, as one of the professors said yesterday, you make very big decisions on something which is based on assumptions, and you make very big investment decisions on something which may not be real. And so today we talk about how to do careful extrapolation on data and how to validate this so you get better numbers, right? But as I said, the main challenge is there are not many methods and techniques for developing countries which are which are checked and used. So that's what we need in longer term. Can we go to the next slide, please? So we talked a bit about the sampling point, and this is again very important. When you read any paper, read any report, get any data, ask yourself, what is the sampling point, especially if it is in a developing country. Sampling point can be a door, sampling point can be your container or storage point, sampling point can be your recovery facility, MRF, transfer station, and sampling point can be your final landfill site or a dumping ground, right? In many cases, people do not mention sampling point, and that means that obviously you don't know what data. I have lots of examples and stories in my career where although in one case, for example, sampling point is a household, but in the bin only part of the waste is coming. They are keeping 11 or 12 animals, livestock for them. It's like a tradition in this area, and that is not coming into your bin. So when you do sampling in the bin or a bag, that waste is not coming anyway. And I have many stories to share with you, but today is limited time. So sampling point is can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Okay. So sampling point is very important. There is a sampling method about the weighing of the vehicle. In developing country, if you do weighing of the vehicle, the main challenge is the vehicle change the routes and it's always mixed stream. So the same vehicle may go to a market, to a residential area, and to another hospital. So it's all mixed. So unless you control that and sample household waste only, then you get reasonable sampling from the vehicle. But that's not only the household is not only the mainstream in many countries. So then there are methods of assessment at the transfer point and final disposal and discrete dumping spaces. Now, one message here is when you do your sampling at any of these stages, try to validate and cross-check it from other stages. That's what I recommend, right? Do not rely on a single method because the streams add and taken away a lot in developing countries, right? And always validation in whatever way you do is quite key, right? So as I said before, there is a heavy reliance on sampling household waste and then extrapolation for other streams, right? And we will be talking about that a bit more. Okay, can we go to the next slide? So when you report your data based on a small sample for a city, and some especially larger cities or all size of cities, it's a challenge, but it's a very big challenge for larger cities who got many different development activities. First thing is it's very important that you understand how the system is operating. Do not assume that, I think there was a comment as well, that do not assume that collection is happening, door-to-door collection is happening in every part of the city. So in the city, if you understand the system, you may find that in some cases, door-to-door collection is happening. In some cases, households are taking their waste. In some cases, waste collectors are doing it. In some cases, it's weekly. In some cases, it's daily. So try to understand the real system and do before it, right? So so the other one of the reasons for this challenge is not only the sample is small, but there are also sorry, I was talking a bit about the next slide, but also there are variations across the year, across the, there are in some cases there are festivals, in some cases there are markets, weekly markets, right? When we do household sample only, we do not take account of number of those very important streams, right? So seasonal and income variations are there, and then there are small streams mixed together in developing countries, but also large stream bypass the municipal system. So I think this is very important that, for example, if you have 2 or 3 large industries or a very big livestock area, they bypass the system. Yeah, for questions, we will have at least half an hour. So I will give you a lot of time for questions. I think I got only 3 more slides, and then we will go to the questions and comments. Yeah. So some of the streams bypass, and there are other challenges of extrapolating and using the small sample. So if you go to the next slide. So what second suggestion, and this is very important, that try to understand the system as it happens very, very clearly before you jump to the data collection. We, as a researcher, as a specialist, we have a desire to start collecting data quickly, and I think important thing is to hold on, wait till you understand what system is operating, right? So from the household, how much waste is going to the official dumping side, right? How much waste is going to illegal dumping side, and what route it is taking. In many cases, we don't know these, and we pick a decent household group and we start sampling because we need data. But in my suggestion is that we need data, but with a purpose. We need data which should be representative of the city, right? It's not just about the data, but it's the data about the reality of the system. So a lot of streams may be going to illegal dumping site, and then how many streams are known, but also how many streams are unknown. So you try to take 2 steps back and try to look at the city as how many other streams are being generated, because some are unknown, and in some cases waste management authorities would say, oh, this is not our responsibility. Yeah, that's okay, this is not your responsibility, but still it is a waste stream, because if you're building a final disposal site or a recycling plant about a specific material, they may be interested in that stream, right? So to for a decent city level data set, you need to understand what streams are known, what streams are unknown, and how much I need to know about those streams, right? So streams within the system, streams which are official responsibility, streams outside the official responsibility. Now, I did this mistake, and I don't want you to do this mistake, that in some cases we say, let's take municipal area, but you are generating city level data, and municipality may be responsible for only 60% of the city area. There may be cantonment board, there may be housing authorities, there may be private housing, there may be other things, right? So I suggest when you take any such decision, ask yourself, is that the right decision? Are we talking about only municipal waste? Are we talking about city waste, right? And those things are very important. Even if it's an assignment for the municipality, I suggest you bring city level data into that and show them that this is municipal responsible data and this is outside the municipal responsibility. And then there are also very interesting variations about the where the streams meet the municipal system. So for example, in some cases, the collection of waste is not the municipal responsibility, but then the collected waste coming to a municipal facility at maybe a transfer point or a disposal facility, right? And that is very, very important, that the where the streams meeting the where the other streams meeting the municipal official system, right? When I say municipal system, I mean official municipal responsibility, officially municipality's responsibility. When I say city data, I mean things which are within municipal responsibility, things which are outside municipal responsibility. In large cities of Asia, almost 40 to 50% of the population are normally outside the municipal responsibility, right? Or they have irregular collection systems, right? So patchy responsibility, let's say. So you need to think about the data. There may be port authorities in the city, there may be industrial areas in the city, there may be large livestock yard, there may be fishing harbor. So when I say city data, I mean all this data which is generated from the city, not only the municipal responsible areas. Can we go to the next slide now? So I think some of it we covered, but important thing is who is responsible for different parts of the waste at the city level. So municipal responsibility, government responsibility, non-government responsibilities, private responsibilities, other you need to map that out, right? And then how the official system is operating, which may be less than 50% or 50% large cities, which may be more than that. So how the official system and intention is operating, how the unofficial material flows are operating. So in many cases, private sector, NGO, small service providers, they're operating, how they are taking waste in what stages to the final disposal site. And then as I said earlier, I'm repeating that identify all the large streams which are operating at the city, right? So if you think about my earlier point, your sampling at the household waste will not give you idea of what is happening at entire city level, right? So when you talk to key informants, when you do visits, when you look at the maps, use the maps, you have an idea that, okay, these are very big streams at the city levels. In one city, we found 5,500 buffaloes supplying milk in the city, and their total waste generation was 10%, which was purely organic waste, right, of the entire city data available there. So identify I would say top 10, but depending on your purpose, it may be 5, 10, or 20. So identify big streams by weight and related to your purpose, and then assess the variations. So these are really key things that if you are trying to develop citywide waste data, you need to really think and work outside just the household. And a common weakness in our methods is that we build up everything from the household. So I think this is the main point in the slide, that how you overcome this challenge by looking city first and then sampling your focus areas later, right? And then there may be income groups variations and other things. So if you go to, I think there's one more slide, and then we will open the floor for, we have an assignment, and then you will have a lot of time for questions. Yeah. So I will need facilitators' help with the questions in the chat box, and you can also raise your hands and ask questions. So key points from this session: think about overall purpose of data collection, and this must be agreed in advance. Do not jump and collect data even if somebody asks you, a very senior person, maybe a mayor or your bosses ask you, collect data, and then we will see, ask them politely, nicely, okay, tell me how you want to use the data, why we are collecting the data, right? So ascertain your purpose in the data collection before you start your exercise. Systemic understanding is very, very important. A very key point here is that do not start your sampling before you understand how the system is operating, because there may be lots of addition, diversions, and mixing of the data. As I said at least few times now, citywide data reporting must not be based on household-based stream. Now things are changing. I've seen recently some very good data sets from some cities, but it is a common issue that the household-based sampling is always the basis of city-wide data, which can go very incorrect. So try to move away from there. And city may have a lot of known and unknown waste streams, so try to capture and map those. These streams may influence each other. So again, one big streams divided into two streams, and then one of those streams can go to the landfill. Another of those streams can go to the recycling area. So think about just not the stream, but how the streams move in your systems flow in your value chain. And how those streams vary, that's very important, because seasonal variation in industrial, especially industrial, agriculture area, peri-urban areas are very important. So capture those. And report city data, I'm repeating this, report city data, but not just easy to assess streams. So we have, based on this discussion, we have a short assignment for you, which you can do and submit to the organizers before I open the floor for question and answer. So next slide. On the next slide, if you move to the next slide. So the quiz for today is you write down 3 advantages and 3 disadvantages of household level based sampling at the door only, right? So what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages if you just sample household waste at the door? What a purpose of citywide data collection? And write down 3 differences in waste sampling in high-income countries versus waste sampling in developing countries. So in high-income countries, assume what are the things in place in high-income countries. And if you take some of those methods to low-income countries, what are the differences? So I think we are quite good in terms of time now. As I promised to you, we have half an hour. So we will have I'm looking forward to a very good discussion with you. And the floor is open now. So if organizers can pick up chat questions and YouTube questions, I will keep an eye on who is asking the question by raising the hands, right? Okay, thank you very much. We are now on for questions and answers.
Dr. Nasur, you have just closed the cycle you started to draw yesterday with your first presentation. You have covered, among others, the data collection and evaluation both on household and city level. So I would like to say in Urdu, behed shukriya. I hope I'm saying thank you very much. But for participants, you're not allowed to ask in Urdu. Please shift to English again. So I start with the questions, but to keep it open, if you raise your hand, you can ask your questions yourself directly to Dr. Nasur. So Johnny Ikdais, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, Johnny, please go ahead. Good.
Thank you very much. So we wrote a question in the chat, and thank you first of all for organizing this very nice lecture and the whole webinar. It's been very insightful. So the question will be maybe out of context, but it's related to sampling and how we split the city when we do waste characterization. So how do we split the city when doing waste characterization? And I have, from my experience, 2 approaches, one of doing characterization per district basis and the other doing characterization per socioeconomic zones, high, middle, low income. So I would like to know what are the pros and cons of these two approaches, and which one is better to be used in which case. Thank you.
Yeah, Johnny, thanks very much. Very good question. So if the purpose is feasibility study and understanding citywide data collection, and there's no sharp and specific purpose for your exercise, then usually we start with the socioeconomic zones, right? So as you said, low income areas, high income areas, middle income area, that's usually a starting point. I think the key point from my lecture is that do not immerse yourself too much. Do not focus yourself only on the household waste, because there may be zones with many markets. There may be zones with livestock. There may be zones where peri-urban activities are more common. There may be zones where settlers are coming and going. There may be zones where renting is more common. So go divide and understand those zones as per second layer, but also as per the purpose of the assignment. So if the purpose of the assignment is recycling or organic waste or better collection system, then you try to understand, okay, what is happening beneath those zones. In a recent study, I found something very interesting. The high-rise, the flats, the apartments blocks, 4 stories, 5 stories, 10 stories, the dynamics was very different, right? The characterization even was very different. So again, keep an eye open on physical structure, socio-economic, and what's happening elsewhere. Right? Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Nasser, could you please respond to the questions to Natalie Pano? When we say small sample, what does this mean in number or percentage? You're mute, Dr. Nasser. Would you please unmute yourself?
Just a second. I'm just back.
Okay.
Sorry, there was a background noise. The question was about the small sample, isn't it?
Yes, Dr. Mansour, the question was, when we say small sample, what does this mean in number or percentage?
So many times I was asked what is a good sample for solid waste management, and when I asked them 5% or 10% of the population, the answer was we don't have budget and time for that, right? So then they asked, okay, what is the minimum sample we can draw? And as a result, people sample 50 household, 100 household, sometimes 10 household. It's quite common, actually. I've seen it a lot. And they then start drawing big data sets for the city. I felt very bad about it. This is not professional. And ideally, we should fight for a decent sample. And as a young professional, if the resources and commitment for something very important is not there, you try to say, if you can, try to say no to the job, because waste data is so important and so compromised in many cases. So when I use the term small sample, I mean 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 maximum, that sort of household, 100 household for a population of 5-10 million people, right? So that was one thing. Second is sometimes people say, if we collect a sample from 30 household, we can run some statistical test. That's okay, but try to do a decent stratified sampling if possible, from different zones, different times if possible, and do fight for that. Yeah, so that is important, and allocate more budget and clarify the purpose. So that was the issue about the small sample. Thanks.
We still have 2 hands raised, and I'm beginning with Vishnu, and Emmanuel, be ready for the next one. So Vishnu, you can unmute yourself and go ahead.
Thank you, sir, for your session.
We hear you, but not very well. Maybe you come closer to your PC or your mobile.
Am I audible now?
Hello.
Now
Am I
we
audible?
can hear you.
Yeah, okay. So I just want to ask one query, like as you mentioned about the difference between a municipal solid waste and also a city waste. So as when we are collecting a data, we should prefer a city waste because we will be getting a proper data of a city when we do. That's I also agree with you, and I also want to do like that. But according to our project, according to our from my experience, from a few years of experience, the project will be handling with the local authority or municipality or corporation. So when we take data of a total city, as you told, like around 60% of the waste only will be handling by the municipal corporation or municipality. So like our funding agency will not be understanding about the need of that, because that funding agency will be working with the corporation, and the corporation also will not be thinking of that, or don't want to like showcase that data, because it will give so much extra like a waste number like that. Okay, so how can we tackle that issue?
Yeah, that's exactly the point I was trying to convey. That that we have in the sector, we have a very project to project approach for data, right? So when we have a project, we collect data, and the project sometimes specified for a municipality, for a low income area, or something else, right? So you get a data, and then we do a project. But as a result, what is happening? There are very few decent, comparable city level data sets across the world, because we have adopted a project to project approach. So in your case, it's quite challenging to convince the donor unless you educate them and inform them. Also convince the government that okay, this is not about responsibilities, but also we are doing a bigger data set. What can work in this case, that if there is a something like a city level think tank or journalist community or a mayor's training office or something happening, you need to also talk to them and say, look, we are doing this exercise. If you add a little bit of funding or even no funding, we can easily extrapolate it with the and we can bring some data for the city level. So you try to hit two purposes with one goal, because if you have a project, you have some resources, right? So, and your team is mobilized, you have understanding, skills, and all that, right? You have also collected secondary data. So all this is in place, right? Adding few more days to get a city level data set can do the job. But sometimes we are so narrowly focused on projects, right? So I think it's partly it's advocacy, and partly it's also how you think beyond the project as well. I always work outside projects in my life. Sometime I was challenged because of that, but try to do both if you can. So that is my answer, Vishnu, and it's a very good question. Thanks.
Thank you.
Emmanuel, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning to everyone. Well, it's now 5:23 in my zone, so I'm somewhat very sleepy. I've been up since 2:30 a.m. just to listen to this workshop. Quite interesting. Some of the challenges that we face within small island states, especially in poor communities, where you have informal waste pickers extracting quote-unquote recyclables from the landfill, taking it back to their residence, sorting out the waste, removing what they need, and returning the unwanted one back to the landfill. So you have duplication of waste. You collect waste, take it home, extract, and take it back to the landfill. How do you approach that system when you're doing a waste study to get a true picture of your waste per person per day, your waste capita per capita? How do you resolve that issue? Thanks.
Yeah, so that's a very good question, Emmanuel. Thank you very much. And thanks for your commitment to the training. So when I talked about understanding the system and the system dynamics, that exactly a very good example you shared about how the system can be changing, variable, dynamic, and bringing in and out of the system. So in this case, suppose it's not an informal sector, it's an industry, right, which is registered, suppose, yeah. So the industry will be extracting the waste from the final disposal site as a material, they're recycling, and then they will have some rejects, right? And those rejects will go into the system again. So you need to explain that in your data set, that this is disposed of and then this is retrieved. I was looking at Andy Whiteman's slides, and I think there is a very good mention of how things go in and out of the system. So you can I'm sure you can use that thinking and report it in your narrative or supporting flow charts, that this is dumped, but this is retrieved and back in the system. I think the point is you need to communicate your data very clearly based on the understanding of the system, right? And in many cases, we communicate the data in a very simplistic form. So the complex part, sometimes it's not there, but you can then explain within your narrative, within your supporting flow chart, within your examples, that this is how happening. In many cases, people use boxes and examples to show the variations, and it's a very good approach as well. So that's what I can say at this point, but let's have a discussion on this further. After the webinars, we can connect and talk about it. It's a very good point. Thank you. Ansu, probably.
So the only single question I've seen it today about this topic, waste to energy, from us at ULA. The question is how to estimate the waste for energy to energy project. Maybe it's more waste incineration, because waste to energy is different. If you could just elaborate it, what you exactly mean. But I will just put the question to Dr. Mansour, and he could just comment on it based on his understanding to the question.
Yeah, I'm not really an expert, but I can only say that you need to think about what components of waste are important for waste to energy plant, and where they are generated, whether your plant takes mixed waste or separated waste, and you sample according to that. So that's what I can say, but as I'm not an expert on sampling for obviously this type of project. So that's a good question, but I'm sure somebody can answer.
Dr. Mansour, apart from incineration plant, do you also see the anaerobic digestion as a waste of energy when it comes to separated biogas to generate?
I have less expertise. My expertise is outdated on this, so I'm sure somebody can answer this.
Okay.
Thank you. I think there's a raised hand also.
If you have the speakers who could answer, just feel free. Well, we go to the Ansu Bangura.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you for the wonderful presentation, and thanks for the organizers of this training. Specifically, I'm from Sierra Leone, and there is one small city called Kwedu, which we actually tested the WAT application, so like the household waste composition analysis. But the challenge that we faced at that time was to actually get the actual waste per capita data. You know, often a time when there are opportunities for waste composition analysis, households, more especially in poor countries, they use that opportunity for a general household cleanup. So if you are giving them bags or bins for them to put their waste, they use the opportunity to just do general cleanup and then deposit into the waste bins. So how, in this situation, how can you ensure that you have an accurate data for waste per capita, being that you have the total population of the household, but at that particular time, they are using that opportunity within the exercise to do general cleanup in the house instead of normal waste generation they do per day or per week? How do you ensure that you have a clear waste per capita data? Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, Ansu. And it's when we do trainings in our university courses, we do almost half a day, half a session on how household behavior change when you start sampling their waste, right? And some textbook also covers it, which is good. So household behavior change when you do the sampling. When I did my first sampling 32 years ago, I knocked at the door, and the lady came and she said, thanks for the bag. We put your bag in a locked wardrobe, and my daughter-in-law is away. When she's back, we will give you all the good stuff she's kept for you, nice bottles and paper and cardboard. So, and this was a very big learning for me in starting my first assignment, that how the behavior changed. So I think what I did is you need to then create some methods of uninformed waste sampling. So you have informed waste sampling, and that's not working, or in some household or some cases not working. So then you think about uninformed waste sampling close to the generation point, which may be door or a collection vehicle or a hand cart. You sample there. So I then sample myself with the hand carts, and this was uninformed. And we gave a very simple question, 2 questions to the waste collectors. As soon as they collect the waste and bring into their cart, they will ask them how many people there and how many days this waste was stored. So now you have the waste and you are asking these questions after collection, right? It gave us a very interesting comparable data set on how the informed and uninformed one. So you need to create uninformed sampling protocol close to the source if possible. That's a short answer to you. Thanks very much. Yeah.
Dr. Mansour, we still have one last question for you, but I give you a short break and go to Andy Whiteman, if he could unmute himself and give his comment on the questions regarding the waste to energy.
Yeah, please.
Hi, Mansour. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Andy. Yeah.
Hey, nice to see you again, mate. So yeah, waste to energy on that topic. It's a term which has been co-opted by the incineration industry, but as their own. But it doesn't just belong to incineration industry. It's a family of technologies, all which generate useful, recoverable energy in terms of either by electricity, heat, or basically electricity or heat. So mass burn incineration is included in waste to energy, anaerobic digestion at different scales, whether that's community scale, centralized scale, utilization of refuse-derived fuels in cement kilns or industrial boilers is also waste to energy. Briquetting, cottage scale is arguably waste to energy, and in my view it is. As well, and landfill gas utilization, not to forget, that is also waste to energy. So the term has been co-opted by big business a little bit, and I do like to take the opportunity, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to try to unpack that, to remove the mystique.
Thank you, Andy, for your comment. And now we have no questions left unanswered. I'll get back to Dr. Mansour for the last question. And it is from Ranchipo Muhadi. Thanks, Dr. Mansour, very insightful. Just a quick question. Can this method of data extrapolation be used in hospital setup for medical waste?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think in hospitals the key issue is also again mixing of infectious waste packaging with household waste, especially if in the hospitals doctors and nurses are also residing, they are living there, then it is an issue. So same challenges, but because hospital is a controlled or can be a controlled environment within the boundaries, you can do longer term sampling. You can stop a truck while it's leaving the hospital. You can do sampling as per wards. So it's less complicated, slightly less complicated than the city level data collection, but similar principles, same principles are important there. Yeah. Okay, thank you. I think that I just not like to pick up a couple of comments from the chat box, and also Vishnu would like to ask another question. So
Go ahead.
Can I ask, my question is to Andy, what is your intake on like incineration as a waste to energy method, one of the method like incineration? So what is your intake?
Is it okay? Do you want me to answer now?
Yes, please go ahead. If Dr. Mansour is okay with it.
Yeah,
that's okay, Andy. Yeah, please. Yeah.
Cool. I am not anti-incineration. I think it's a technology which is essential for some and many, increasingly many very highly urbanized and large mega cities, where transport distances are prohibitive for identifying other options. It is becoming cheaper as a unit cost, both in terms of capital and operating costs, due to the massive expansion of the Chinese incineration industry. The standards of Chinese incinerators are very high in the technical standards which can be achieved. Incineration always needs flue gas cleaning, and also incineration sets up the need for hazardous waste management from bottom ash. So it's not a final disposal that technology. It's a very mass bulk reducing technology, and you always need to also think about having secure landfill. And also, so the costs per ton are prohibitive for many cities, and that needs to be taken into very careful consideration. And so I advise careful study. Data is vital, not just data of generation, but also collected. Basically, your incinerable waste is the waste which has already passed through the informal value chains and out the other end. So do your waste characterization at the point of disposal in order to do useful data analysis, and be careful of quantities as well, because these monsters need to be fed on a continuous basis.
Thank you very much. We are at the end of the course, but I would like to ask a question from my side to all the three speakers. If Leibo is also here, but we are running out of time. So I would appreciate if you could answer the question in 2 minutes maximum per speaker. So we have 6 minutes more. Then my colleague Shiza will explain how the assignment works. How will you get it? How do you submit it? And how the certificates will be issued. So in 6 minutes, you will hear from Shiza. My question is, I would like to hear, to just pack up what we have discussed since yesterday. What is your comment when it comes to the national solid waste plan for a country, regardless if it is a developed or developing countries? Do you go for decentralized system like small small composting plants, small anaerobic digestions, or small MRF, regardless of the facilities? Do you go for decentralized system, or you are more in favor of centralized system, like a big projects for like a big incineration plant for a big city, not for a country, or a big composting facility or anaerobic digestion or a big MRF? So I would like to hear your comments based on your long experience. So we will start with Flavio first, if he's still here.
Yes, hello everyone. Yes, I'm still here. Well, I mean, it's a good question, and I think that the answer is I cannot really come up with a straightforward answer here. I think it pretty much depends. And I think in general, it should be a combination. It should be a combination of different decentralized, centralized facilities. It all depends on the quantities involved, then the capacity to build facilities, to manage those facilities. Affordability must be considered. So, for example, in case you have, you cannot reach the economies of scale for large facilities. For a large facility in a city, you might consider a combination of a regional approach, for example, where you bring, more cities or, settlements together, and then you build the centralized facilities for those communities. But again, there you must have the funding in place, the funds for the to cover for the capital expenditure, and then you need the system in place to operate that regional system. So I guess this is pretty much the EU model, which has expanded in the new member states, EU new member states, and in the neighboring countries. But as I said, decentralized facilities could also work, of course, at a small scale. It could be in combination with the centralized facilities as well. So you might have facilities, small scale facilities for specific waste streams and specific clients, let's say. So yeah, that would be my answer here.
I appreciate, Flavio, for your input. Now we go to Dr. Mansour.
Yeah, thanks for this question. So I would like to share two points. One is I feel one of the things which is very important in considering this, that what a national government or a national ministry should do or could do, and what a city level or regional level authorities should do and could do. And that distinction is, in many cases, that distinction is very unclear. For example, in the UK, we used to have a Deputy Prime Minister's office. And within Deputy Prime Minister's office, one unit was about waste management and recycling in those days. And part of their remit was also data and collection and all that. But regulatory functions and policy functions can be best done at the national level. So that is one part. The second is throughout my life, I'm very much fond of decentralized approaches and small scale. And one of the big reasons is they are very efficient in dealing with the ground level, community level waste, keep the streets clean, and they are less influenced by large scale global corruption and vested interest, because people generally, those big projects do not pay attention to what's happening on the ground. So one example I came across 2 years ago doing a national study for Bangladesh is, and they may not be aware, and I did my first assignment in Dhaka 22 years ago, and we captured some of these decentralized community-based collection which were growing. And now, based on this study, what I found that 90% of Dhaka city, which is quite a large city actually of 16 million people, is covered by small scale initiatives. and government has created a space for them. So then government can focus on landfill sites, large transfer stations and other things, but the streets are clean because of the decentralized system. So this is very interesting example, how you cut the cake between what communities can do and what regions can do and what national can do. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nasser. I wish the speakers from first day, Professor Get Gorshik and Mercy from you and Habitat could also comment, but since they are not here today, Andy, you started the presentations today and you can end it with your comment.
That's an honor. Thank you so much. Well, there's no simple answer to that question. It's both. You always need centralized facilities because you will always need a safeguarding landfill. That landfill should be regarded as a waste management facility. We should try to phase out the use of the term dump site because it's a pejorative. There should be either controlled or non-controlled or different levels of controlled disposal site. They do require investment. They do require operating costs. I battle in my project work to try to raise awareness that operating costs of disposal do need to be secured, and in order to secure them, it is often best as a separate budget line because the money will always flow to collection services. So over time, you want better standard of landfills, therefore you end up with fewer of them, and they're regionalized strategic facilities. The role of national government varies depending on what your geospatial, what your demographic situation. Our friend from Jamaica is posting on the chat function there. Let's talk about small island states. Well, very important to have a stronger national contribution. Sometimes in small island developing states, the setting up of national solid waste management, like sort of quasi-public authorities that provide a stable framework for contractors to operate collection services as well as back-end systems. I am by nature a waste management planner, and you have to safeguard spaces within your urban environment for intermediate facilities like transfer collection points. Otherwise, your city expansion can rapidly overrun and you end up with a very, very expensive system. Decentralized approaches are really very cost effective. So the more you can do at the local level, the more employment you can generate, the more you can, as Mansour said, the more you keep it real, essentially, with the community. The more you can do on a decentralized basis, the better, but you'll always need those centralized facilities, and those need to be regulated. There needs to be framework conditions in place at the national level to ensure that financing, technical capacity, etc., is also focused on ensuring good quality disposal.
Thank you very much, Andy. Now it's time for me to say bye, dear audience and participants. It was a pleasure for being here with you, and hopefully we will meet somewhere in the world with a waste project. Now I give the floor to my colleague Shiza. She will explain more about the certificates, the assignments, and closing the webinar. Thank you very much. Enjoy your day or your evening. Bye-bye.
Yeah, we are already 8 minutes more in the time we allocated, but I'll try to keep it short and brief. So thank you, Razgar, for giving me the opportunity to explain, and thank you to Andy, Flavio, and Dr. Mansour for today's great session. Just to wrap up, the idea was again for the session was to maybe deep dive and have a more taste of waste audit, that waste audits are not just about what the sampling size is or what the formulation behind it, but it has much more aspects to it and much more thinking that goes into it. And also, as Andy said, it a lot of times it becomes as a participatory exercise for many. And once you would get into the field and be doing the waste audit yourself, I hope you come across that kind of a warm welcome from the culture around you and people so forth. That being said, for the certification, we will be sharing 2 quiz links for day 1 and day 2, hopefully on Monday via email. And for the certification, we have the attendance sheet with us for the both of days. And then on top of that, we would like that to receive your answers, receive from the quizzes and the assignment for both of days. We will share the deadline, but in nutshell, the whole assignment and quizzes will not take more than 30 minutes. And within a week, you will all receive a certificate, those who successfully submit the assignments and have been attending those 2 sessions. That being said, please consider this training course and all the participants and the speakers a kind of a platform for networking. Feel free to reach out, whether on LinkedIn or via email. Always happy to connect and reach out. That being said, it is also because I've been working under when I started waste auditing, I started my first exercise under the supervision of Flavio. That's when I applied Waste Wise Cities tool, but we had also the opportunity to virtually attend Andy's workshop in the Philippines. I believe it was Philippines. And since then also been working with Dr. Mansoor. So all my top tier mentors are here, and I hope you would get the same chance to work with them and perhaps among yourself as well. So as Raskar said, hopefully meet perhaps at some waste related project or otherwise. If you have any question, feel free to email us. You have our email, and any feedback is always welcomed. But with that, thank you, everyone. Yeah, and have a very nice day. With that, I think we will just close the session. Rezgar, if you have any ending thoughts, sure.
Thank you. Bye.
Can't close the session. I'm just saying bye-bye. Enjoy your day.
Bye bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.